Hi there. Welcome back. My name is Cynthia, and this is my Obsidian Mirror Scrying podcast for the first quarter moon after the total new moon eclipse in Aries. And there's been a lot of really incredible and powerful, potent, almost physical feeling energy moving in the ether. If you're someone who likes to tap into stuff like this, I'm sure I'm telling you something you're already experiencing. I've actually been really excited to do this session and scry into what's been happening. And I kind of noticed a level of hunger for it that was intriguing. And simultaneous to that I started noticing like my excitement and my desire to start using my mirror more frequently than just on the 4 lunar phases that we sort of tend to pay attention to. I noticed I wanted to resist that because mirror scrying, and especially an obsidian mirror, is a very powerful tool, and it's also a healer, and it's not something to really be done on a whim, in my opinion. So I was trying to just take note of the hunger or desire I had to use it, and paying attention to why that might be, because it's kind of exciting, because the more I use it, the more I grasp my own capacity to understand some of the things I'm seeing and what they mean for my own life. And that can be a little bit intoxicating to the ego. So then there's a desire to look more and look more deeply. And that becomes risky when you're seeking power in that way, right? So those are thoughts that have just been kind of kicking around. And then now I'm not seeing, it was not a coincidence, and I'll circle back to why, but I had a dream a few nights ago that was happening in that liminal space right before you wake up. And it was basically these 3 kings, which is not lost on me that I was doing a lot of 3 king and magi work around the Christmas season, and also around Hanukkah, and just some of that really ancient symbol around Jerusalem and places, and the magi, and who were they? They were likely Zoroastrian priests and such. And so I went really deeply into that stuff a little while ago, a few months ago. So then in this dream, these 3 kings kind of arrived in my life, and they were very focused and very intelligent and very determined, and they were dressed like kings, kind of in a way that I would understand that they were kings. And they were offering to serve me, and it was wild. I've never had a dream like that, first of all. I've had other significant dreams, but a dream like that seems meaningful, right? Like I remember in the dream being really tempted and intrigued by this offer and thinking, boy, I never thought something like this would ever happen in my life. But also being aware that, like, gosh, I don't know, that just seems so excessive. Like, that just seems like a lot of excess. Like 3 kings serving me, like, what am I seeking? What would that be for? What would be indulging that level of these 3 people serving my whims? Like, what would that really be accomplishing in terms of something greater than myself, I guess? And so the dream stayed with me, and I've really been examining it. Like, is an offer like that something to fear? Is it something to draw near? Is it something to examine as sort of a form of temptation or illusion? Like, what does all of this mean? And sometimes I'm averse or uneasy with Christian imagery and Christian judgments and spiritual judgments around sexuality. So there was that kind of layer as well, because there was this kind of erotic energy around these kings offering to serve me in this other layer. So it was a lot. It was a lot to process and be thinking about, and something that seemed like it was happening for a reason. Then tonight, about an hour ago, before I was getting ready to sit down and do this mirror gaze and scrying session, I was actually reading an old published piece from an online journal source called JSTOR. It was a publication on Egyptian scrying and old uses of ink scrying and mirror scrying. And as I started reading it, it went into the Jinn, which the Jinn, or genies, as they're also known, are also called Devas. That's a whole world of spirituality that I haven't touched on very much in the scrying session, but that's very appropriate to come up in reading about scrying, especially from that part of the world, because these are nature spirits, and some are also considered demonic spirits or dark spirits versus light spirits. And there's an entire like pantheon of jinn and kingdoms of jinn and jinn energy. Another way of, and another concept of thinking about those are angels and demons to some extent, but that doesn't quite capture the nature spirit aspect of them. So as I'm reading this article, it talks about the 7 kings of the jinn, and there were a couple kings of the jinn who are kings of the dark jinn, the lust demon jinn, the jinn that steer you into lust and into vice, which was sort of mind-blowing. Like, as I was sitting there reading this article, my head kind of exploded just about, because I'd had this dream where these 3 kings are kind of like offering to serve me. And I was like, my God, that was a dream about the Jinn Kings and how the jinn would sort of trick people into being released from the bottle. And it was this very sobering lesson for me, and I think for anyone who's interested in this kind of work, that it demands a great deal of respect. And that is a great example of why, because I just started going down the rabbit hole of scrying more and more and more, and indulging the dream about these 3 kings and diving into that sort of erotic, their offer to serve me and give me power and do my work for me. Those are like temptations, and I know that sounds very biblical, but these are ancient concepts that, of course they're going to show up in the Bible as well. Concepts about your light and dark horse. What parts of you are you going to indulge and give the most attention to? So that was all very humbling. And so I sat down, I burned some rose resin and some frankincense to just kind of thank that sort of Zoroastrian history and the visitors of these Jinn Kings, and recognition that some of the Jinn Kings were considered to rule over the power to scry through the mirror itself. Whether that be ink, whether it be a obsidian, whether it be of steel, or a piece of metal, right? Water, it can be anything. But there were Jinn Kings considered to rule over that practice. And so I thought, well, I want to really make sure that I'm really respecting this process. And so I burned frankincense, rose for them, sat down, really humbled myself, and really set some intentions that my intentions for this scrying session are always to benefit and for the positive. And sometimes we might see dark things, but my hope is that helps us understand the dark side of ourselves for our healing. So with that, I opened the gaze, I opened the mirror itself, and this is where I started just gazing in and sitting there for a little while looking. And the first thing I saw was a map of Palestine, which is appropriate. Again, this is the part of the world we're talking about that's being deeply impacted by what we might say are dark energies and dark trickster energy. So what happened was, as I was looking at this image of Palestine, all of a sudden it morphed into a leg. And it was a leg of a dancer, like a dancer who would be someone who danced for the gaze of men. A dancer in silk, possibly, or in a modern version of a dancer in a club, right? Like perhaps in a topless place or a place that has bottle service. That was kind of what I was seeing in and out, like a dancer dressed in silks, and then a modern day dancer in a heel, like on a pole. And it was really just showing me her leg crushing out a cigarette. And the leg would then turn into a map of Palestine, and then it would kind of go back into this dancer's leg, like just crushing a cigarette under the foot. And I know that sounds intense, and please bear with me, because I'm just this 50-year-old white lady in the United States. This is a lot of really powerful imagery that I really want to do respect to. And I really want to make clear how much respect I have for anyone, including people who dance for the male gaze. I have no disrespect. In fact, I have the utmost respect. I appreciate that kind of art, honestly, if I'm just being honest. So I'm not equating Palestine to sex work, but what the image was showing me was that if we're looking at the challenges of the trauma and brutality that man or that people are enacting against one another in a place like Palestine right now, that's presently what's happening. We can get distracted by the vice element of men and addiction and oil and war and combat and vice and living for capital and for money. We can stop there at the gaze, or we can go deeper. So then it moved away from that map and leg image and into a deeper version. And it showed us as seekers, anyone who might be wanting to follow this line of inquiry into this gaze itself and what I'm describing right here, was going deeper and going past those vice concepts of lust and demon energy and go deeper down into the kind of abyss within ourselves, and not the external abyss. Like for us in the Americas, where most of us are listening to this, that's far away, as much as we may not want to other what's happening in Palestine, because it's not other, it's a reflection of us ourselves here. No matter where we are in the planet, we all understand what's happening. But we can either externalize that all as vice and seeking externally, or we can also look at what's happening in Palestine and go deep within ourselves. And then showed the quest and how the illusory nature of doing that, because we often want to think I could never participate in something like that. In fact, I want to show that I would never participate in something like that. And I'm going to show my action is doing this to show that I'm against that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's important. And that's the process we're talking about. Which part within us do we want to indulge? But by paying attention to the parts of us that we don't like the parts of us that maybe do want to bury our head in the sand and turn away and pretend it's not real, or the parts of us that want to say that's way across the world and I have my own problems with just putting food on my table. Why should I care about what's happening, right? Like if we go within ourselves while we're simultaneously looking at what's happening in Palestine, we're going straight to our own shadow and our own lust or vice demon inside of us. And then it showed that demon to me turning into the Count from Sesame Street. And the best way that I can think of to try to capture that in words is that something really horrible, like a demonic vampire that sucks on the energy and blood and life of others, once it's explored and looked at and treated with compassion and examined and had a light shown on it, it becomes the Count, which is a friendly version that helps children how to count, right? So that's a very American, and I apologize for that in advance. That's my frame of reference. So these are symbols that mean something to me. But the Count on Sesame Street is a safe monster, like a lot of the characters on Sesame Street are, right? And Jim Henson understood children and understood our fears and understood how to help us feel safe and loved and secure, even with the parts of us that we get maybe in trouble for, like Oscar the Grouch, or like the Count, or like dark things that scare children, right? When we shine the light on those dark parts within ourselves, we can transmute that darkness into comfort and into healing. And so it was sort of like, do we want to focus on the vice around the events and the trauma happening in Palestine, or do we want to focus within and focus on healing or shining a light on our own shadow side? And it wasn't saying do one or the other. It was just saying both are in play here, and that we shouldn't be forgetting to go within. And I know that part of my goal has been not to interpret these messages, but these messages came through with these interpretations. They're not my interpretations, that I was being shown that interpretation. And so the way that I'm trusting that interpretation is that I sat down to do this gaze with a lot of prayer ahead of time and a lot of intention setting, that I care about who I'm listening to when I open up an obsidian mirror and do a gaze. I want to make sure that if I'm listening to three kings of lust and vice of the Jinn world, that I know that. I don't want to think that those are angelic Archangel Michael type entities. They're not. They're a very different part of the planet and the energetic planes that we all exist within. I'm going to refrain here from judging them all as all bad or all good or whatever, right? They exist with the consent of God, right? These are parts of ourselves. And so it all kind of came together and harmonized in this meaningful way. How the eclipse plays into that, or how this moon cycle quite comes together with that, I have yet to kind of land on. But that is pretty much the final message. That we don't need to necessarily fear something like the Jinn King that is the king of the demonic jinn. We just need to understand his nature, and we need to recognize that versions of him exist within ourselves, and we can't pretend that's not true. So then I close to the mirror, and that's the rest of the gaze. Now I'm just going to pull the follow-up ending cards like I have done thus far in these gazes, and I really thank you for being here. And I very much thank the 3 Jinn Kings that visited me in my dream. And I decline their offer, but with respect, I respectfully decline. And I thank them for showing up, and I thank the Jinn and the Devas spirits for kind of showing me their relationship to the obsidian mirror, which was a relationship I wasn't as tuned into as I should have been. I have a little bit more knowledge of mirror scrying from a Western witch, which of course that's where this comes from, right? These practices are ancient. And it's incredible that they span the globe, right? They're scrying in the Americas, and they're scrying in the old world, old world from an America's standpoint, from a colonial standpoint. I should try to steer away from those types of terms. So on the bottom of the deck is the Temperance card. That's that transmutation of those energies and parts of ourselves. Yeah, 7, the first card out is the 7 of Cups here, which is a card of vice. And so that's right in keeping with that Jinn King that showed up like a lust demon almost, right? Or a part of that world of genie. Oh my God, followed by the Ace of Cups. So pure forms of love that are also represented in the Jinn Kingdom, right? Like there are good, or like Archangel Michael, or the sort of light side of that kind of esoteric energy. The Ace of Cups is a very godly card in the tarot. It's the card of the love of God, or Mary, or unconditional love, right? Oh, and then the third card is clarity, the Ace of Swords. So by combining the wisdom of the mind and the wisdom of the heart, you can avoid falling into vice too much and having vice rule you versus wisdom and clarity of the mind and heart. I'm also going to pull an ink card, an ink blot, and see if I can scry into that a little bit. This is a little bit of a departure from how I was reading with tarot, because this is again another kind of scried image on these ink blot cards. I see right at the center, and this is so beautiful too, because I had a visitor of a beetle with a scarab, a mirror, obsidian mirror on its back, like a scarab, but with I posted it, it's on this channel. And I'm seeing that again, almost, only the spot, well, it's black, like the obsidian mirror, or like any dark ink-based mirror. It's also in a heart shape, and there's red running through it. And it's on the back of a beetle. So this is showing me this kind of visitor of just this nod of joy from the ethers, that this is in keeping with that kind of as above, so below energy. There's also an image here of some sorrow and some bloodshed. And I think that kind of goes back a little bit to the brutality of the genocidal things that are happening over in Gaza. And also on a different level, I did a card reading for someone who was going deeper into animal welfare and animal rights. And there's an image coming through here again about about the suffering of animals. I just need to say it. I'm not trying to make anyone feel shamed here that eats meat, but this is the second time that this has come through, and it's something that it seems like is being highlighted through these messages recently, that we're being asked to really examine if we're really committed to healing. What are we doing if we're doing that, right? If we're not eating meat in a conscious way, where we're examining the suffering that we're contributing to, what are we doing? That's an image that came through here. And I'm going to pull one final oracle card from the Oracle of the Rose here. A rose is an ancient symbol that reflects this Ace of Swords and the Ace of Cups. The heart and the air, the water and the air element. The chalice and the blade. The loner. Wild rose. So it's almost like going back to the essentials, like that a wild rose came through here versus a cultivar. It's, I think, kind of a nice punctuation to embrace the wild nature within us so that we can more honestly tackle what's happening in humanity if we want to serve and heal from a place of healing versus destruction and bloodshed and trauma. So it means being comfortable being alone. If you can't go within and look at yourself, right? How can we look honestly at what's happening there? So, and anywhere, violence, it goes, and even including violence in our homes, violence with our children, violence with our animals, violence with our food, violence against the planet, right? That was another thing, those cracks and crevasses, and how the earth is impacted as well, and a part of this whole thing, spinning, big spinning rock. So that's going to be it. I'll go ahead and close it there. Thank you so much. I feel honored that I got to channel a message like this. It's a little overwhelming. I hope it came through in a way that's somewhat easy to follow, even though it's zigzaggy. And I'm going to continue doing these. I'm also thinking about at some point closing this obsidian mirror process out. And as I've done these follow through card readings as well, these shorts in between, I'm thinking I might do a time-limited Obsidian Mirror podcast. This is time-limited, and then the next one would be water and ink, and I would do that for a period of time. I don't know. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.